I'm Jack Berryman, the ACSM historian, and we're here this afternoon talking with Reggie Edgerton as part of ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science series. So thank you, Reggie, for talking with us.
Thank you,
We're
Jack.
close to your home here in San Francisco.
Well, present home. Yeah.
Present home.
Yeah.
So if you could just start out with where you grew up and were you interested in sports and exercise as a young guy, and where you went to undergrad and grad school and sort of the early stage of your career.
Well, I grew up in eastern part of North Carolina in small towns, and actually not even a town. I actually grew up on a farm outside a little small city of Oriental, and in Pamlico County, just quite near the coast and the sound of North Carolina. And from there I went to East Carolina University. At that time it was East Carolina College. And I was interested in sports, and I studied physical education was my major, but I had a double major in biology.
Wow, that's cool.
And because I don't know at what point I became interested in the science of exercise, but it was actually pretty early. And the best I can remember, the thing that really stimulated, I think I already had this idea that you needed to go further than treat exercise as a religion. That you know,
there's more to it.
Exercise is great, and the more you do, the better, and this kind of thing. And I thought, well, I don't know much in life that's like that. So
why should this be?
So I thought that, you know, really we don't know much about the science of exercise, how we move and so forth.
What years were you at East Carolina?
I was there between 58 and 62.
And the state of the art wasn't that great then, was it?
Not that great. There was not a whole lot of science of exercise going on.
What was the Phys of X book? Karpovich?
No, I think that was one of them. Actually, in undergrad, I didn't even have the classical exercise and physiology book.
Okay.
The thing that really motivated me to study the science of exercise was a professor that taught a course, Principles of Education. And it was a negative experience. In other words, I felt like I was listening to a preacher that was telling me, you know, that trying to basically brainwash everyone that this was exercise could do anything for you. And I thought to myself, this is just not possible. And I just wanted to know more of what was behind it. And even then I thought, well, there must be an optimal amount of activity for anyone at any particular state of health in any particular time in their life. It was just unreasonable to think that the more exercise you do, the better off you're going to be, or even in many cases it's going to be a negative. So I had that idea then, and I still have that idea. It's still a key question with respect to how we manage this problem. Particularly, it's even more important today, where we know activity is very important, but still we don't know how much activity to tell everyone to participate in, at what stage in their life, and whether they have a cardiovascular or a neural injury.
Where did you go after East Carolina? Did you know then that I'm going to have to get more studies?
Yeah, at that point I was lucky because I had never been involved in organized swimming, but by accident, I just went to the swimming pool at East Carolina and started helping the swimming coach to arrange the lane markers. And then so he asked me if I wanted to be manager of the team. So I started managing the swimming team and ended up coaching the college, assistant coaching the college team, and and then started, he arranged for me to start a new swimming team at the high school at Greenville, North Carolina. So I started the swim team, and he was very scientific in his approach. That's what I think drew me to him.
Were you still an undergrad then?
I was undergrad, and he was very biomechanical, and he graduated from University of Iowa. And he graduated from University of Iowa when University of Iowa was the peak of the physical education. Nationally, they were well known. So he recommended I go there. And so I went there and ended up just getting my master's degree there, because when I went there, I found out that even though he was there at the peak, I was there at the bottom. Because all the same people or many of the same people that were there when he was there were still there. So this didn't look like the future to me.
So this is mid-60s,
so that
early
was
60s?
62, 63.
Okay. This is pre-Tipton.
I left Iowa probably a month before he came in. Because in my last classes at Iowa, I heard about this new guy coming in that was going to shake things up. And I said, well, that's interesting, but I'm out of here. I'm out of here. You know, I can't. I don't feel that comfortable continuing on. But I had some good experiences at University of Iowa. I had some very good not exercise physiology, but some environmental physiology course.
So you did an MS?
I did a master's degree.
Yeah, okay.
And interestingly, at that time, as naive as I was, I thought, wow, you know, I got a master's degree, everybody would be knocking at my door to give me a job. I found out after applying for a couple of jobs, I thought sure I would get it. I didn't come close. So I ended up going back to Greenville and teaching in high school and middle school for 2 years.
Which was sort of your hometown.
Which was close. It was, you know, within 60 miles of my town. But I had made some good relationships there. The swimmers and the parents were really supportive. In fact, they convinced the high school to bring me, to try to get me to come back. So, so I taught for a couple of years and coached, and that was very hard work. You know, teaching
high school kids.
Teaching high school and elementary or middle school, teaching all the courses, biology, math, and you know, the whole thing. And then I said, God, if I'm going to work this hard, I should be educating myself to do a little better. So I started looking for graduate schools, and I looked around and went to Michigan State to see what they had. And the thing that, the critical factor there that drew me there was I asked them about the courses I would have to take, because I didn't want to go into a traditional physical education program. I knew that was going nowhere. And so I said, what's the curriculum? And they told me, you can take whatever courses you want to. You make your curriculum. And so I said, I'm coming.
That's pretty good.
So that was ideal for me, because what I wanted to do was not like what anybody else was doing that I knew of. And
what year did you go up there then and
started in '65 and finished in '68. And I finished in '68, like in June, and 2 weeks later, I started assistant professor at UCLA. So
and you've never gone anywhere else, have you?
And I went there thinking that, you know, farm boy from North Carolina could not like Los Angeles.
Right. I would have thought that too.
So I was assuming, but I could work there a couple of years, get started until I could find a better job.
Then get the heck out.
So I guess the logical interpretation is I'm still looking for a better job. So
well, who did you work with at Michigan State, and is that when you first found out about ACSM, or had you made that connection early?
It was at Michigan State, because it's a very vibrant program there. There was it was during the period when there was very active participation between University of Michigan, Michigan State, Toledo, Ohio State. We'd have, I think, tri-monthly or bi-monthly meetings that were, pretty important. And Montoya was at Michigan, and I worked with Wayne Van Huss.
Oh, yeah, I know the name, sure.
And Huesner, and so that was, I worked with them, but they allowed me to go wherever I wanted to on campus, so I ended up going to the anatomy department and made a relationship there with the professor, and then I actually learned some techniques, kind of read and found out what kind of techniques I needed to learn, and so one of the things I needed to learn was how to do histochemistry. This was a new thing at the time, and the guy that was doing that with muscle was King Ingham at NIH. So I called him and asked him if I could come and spend a week there
Isn't
to
that
learn
something?
some. He said, "Come on," and he had a technician that was fantastic, and he spent the whole week with me. So I learned the histochemistry and then came back and used that for my dissertation. And,
wow. So if you don't ask, the answer is no, right? I mean,
right.
So UCLA is a plum of a job right out of grad school.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happened too. It just wasn't that they did a world search and I happened to pop up. Because the person that was there that was leaving was David Lamb.
Oh my, yeah.
And David Lamb had been there, I think, 3 years.
Is that when he went to Ohio? Where was he?
David Lamb, David Lamb graduated from Michigan State. I started at Michigan State the year after he left.
Okay.
And so it took me 3 years to finish.
Sure.
And then Lamb was at UCLA for 3 years, and he decided that he wanted to come back to the Midwest.
Okay.
And we had a common friend that told Lamb about me.
Very
and
neat.
so then I went out there for an interview and got the job. And
Wow.
so one of the reasons I got the job was because Lamb wanted to come back to the Midwest.
Sometimes things work out, right? So when you were hired there, Reggie, what was their department called at the time?
It had just been converted to kinesiology.
Okay.
And I say converted because UCLA had previously made the decision. They had been in the process for years of changing where education fit in the university system. Generally, education, especially education of teachers, was to go in the state universities at what was state college system at that time.
Okay.
And so the physical education, the physical activity part of that program was shifted into recreation and in the recreational department. But they kept a faculty that consisted of more or less the classical areas. But the interesting thing there, and the reason things changed there so, I would say so systematically and not rapidly, but reasonably so, was that the dean and the department had decided that they were going to go in the direction of science. It had to go in the direction of science.
That was a conscious decision.
That was a conscious decision. Education,
good.
it could not be education. It would get no support. So the dean and the chair had agreed on that. So they started recruiting people that was going to study the science of movement. So, and the thing that was also different there than in many of the other places is that in many of the other universities, these kind of decisions were made by the faculty. Even though the faculties would know there are these forces that were pushing in this direction. Most of the faculty, because the thinking was still very traditional, they didn't see it. They couldn't get it.
I understand.
And so the only way it could happen, and I still say the only way it can happen today, is you've got to have the people in leadership positions that are making the choices. You it can't be done democratically by a faculty
because they're
vote.
not going to want to do it.
It's not going to change.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of departments have gone by the wayside, I think.
Yeah.
But, and the nice thing about that also was I always felt, even as young and naive as I was, maybe that's why I felt that I had plenty of support. I never worried about the things that assistant professors have to be worried about. Am I going to make it? Am I going to get tenure and so forth? I never even worried about that. I just, when I started working, had a great time and developed some very good relationships that were very protective, very productive.
Yeah.
Almost immediately.
Did you have to set up a lab and everything, or were you able to move in where Lamb left?
I took over Lamb's lab.
Perfect.
And but on the other interesting thing there is there was a paper published in Nature that was related to topic of my dissertation, and I knew they thought they had discovered something new, which they kind of had. But I knew what the interpretation, they were puzzled by what their observations were. And this was that they had a fast muscle that was red. Fast muscles were not supposed to be red, they were supposed to be white. And my dissertation was basically using the histochemistry, showed that there is a third fiber type.
Barnard told me about this
And then,
this morning.
So then I go over and talk with James Peter, and I tell him, I said, look, this is my interpretation of your paper. And he says, you know, I have this postdoc coming in from University of Iowa. This would be a good project to start him off with. So then I learned, see, I missed Tipton, you know, but then I have one of his first students that come in. Not that he was my student, but the three of us, we had a great collaboration.
Yeah, and you've been working together ever since.
Yeah, so we still, he was, Jim was my best man, and
isn't that something?
So there was a lot of by chance connections there that, but it really was, things worked out so well at UCLA.
And you've had a whole cadre of great students over the years.
Yeah, I've had a lot of students, and looking back, most of them are doing pretty well.
And now, did you connect all of them up with ACSM? Was that a big part of your early career?
Early on, this was the thing to do. You did go to American College of Sports Medicine, and one of the first meetings I went to, I remember meeting Ken Baldwin, and this was when he was still a student of
at Iowa.
At Iowa, and he started, and he had gotten interested in the fiber type situation because he was at Iowa. He overlapped with Barnard.
Yes, yeah.
And so, so I remember having this discussion with Ken on the steps of the hotel in the American College of Sports Medicine in Atlanta. And he started telling me about the fiber types, how it worked, and so forth. And I was like, boy, this guy, he thinks he's pretty smart.
Yeah. And then he went on to do a postdoc with Halazzi.
Yeah, right. So.
And then he ends up at Irvine.
Yeah, he ends up at Irvine pretty quickly, and but then we obviously developed a very close friendship and worked.
Yeah.
I mean, in our symposium this morning, I never even thought about looking at it, but he was saying in our collaborations, I think he said we've published 24 papers together with just.
Is that right?
It was Ken's lab and my lab, so
wow.
we've worked together quite a bit. Yeah.
So so Bob Hutton, my old chairman, was one of your students, right?
No, not really.
How did that work?
He was one of my closest friends.
Yes, okay. But he was at UCLA though, right?
He was at UCLA when I got there as an instructor, and he was he was still I think he was just finishing his Ph.D.
I forget where he did
I think he got his Ph.D. at USC because he was still teaching. He was still teaching anatomy and physiology
At SC.
at UCLA.
Oh, at UCLA.
And so I was to start teaching the anatomy and physiology, and this was a combination of anatomy and physiology, taught 5 days a week, 3 hours a day.
Wow.
So he and I taught that course, and on top of all that, compared to the day, there was like 12 to 15 students in the class. So you got to know the students really well.
Yeah.
So then Bob, after he finished his degree, then he started a postdoc with Earl Eldred at UCLA, studying sensory input and in the muscle. And from there, he went to Washington, University of Washington.
Yeah, because he talked about you all the time. I didn't know you at the time.
But
I just knew the name.
Yeah,
you know?
So he and I were, we were very close friends. And interestingly, he and I were kind of some of the few that was interested in the neural aspect of exercise. And to this day, I still don't know why the neural aspect of exercise has not been more popular in the American College of Sports Medicine. It's so obvious of why it is. And of course, I've been very involved in Neuroscience Society, given the spinal cord injury stuff, the way my work has gone more recently. But in the Society of Neuroscience, exercise is one of the most popular topics there.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing.
But it hasn't caught on so much here, is what you're saying.
No, people don't realize it. And it's interesting because the neuroscientists that are using exercise, they really don't understand the science of exercise.
Yeah, there you go.
And the people in American College of Sports Medicine, they don't understand the neuroscience side of it.
They need to get together.
So Bob and I were, we've always tried to bring this as an important topic, but it just hasn't caught on. And but it should.
Yeah.
It should. I mean, to me, it's so obvious. I mean, why should we be concerned with cardiovascular exercise only, or the metabolic aspects? And especially now, it's even more important with the type 2 diabetes, all the evidence that it can have a significant impact on Alzheimer's, memory formation. I mean, everybody is buying this now. I mean, there's obviously a lot of work to be done, but it's pretty clear to a lot of people that there's some level of activity that's pretty critical, right? And this goes back to the original question: how much, when, what should I be doing?
Right.
And when people ask that question, we can't answer that. And why? Because there hasn't been a systematic, sustained science of exercise. It's science, it's pieces of exercise. It's the cardiovascular, it's orthopedic.
Or genetics or whatever.
But it's somehow the whole nervous system has just gotten left out. And it's eventually, I mean, it has to correct itself, or the other possibility is all the expertise is going to end up in Society of Neuroscience. So that's kind of the way it's going.
Yeah.